Welcome, everybody, to our virtual town hall. I'm Alex Lawson, the Executive Director of Social Security Works. We've partnered with AFGE, Council 220, to put together this virtual town hall on Social Security funding and why it is vital for the future of all of our earned benefits. Now, the Social Security Administration does an amazing job. For less than 1% of all the premiums paid into the system, they administer the entire program. But it gets harder and harder each year because of a sustained 40-year attack on the program through underfunding. And we're here today to demand, first to explain just how critical the situation has become, and then to demand that Congress take action first in December and going forward to fully fund the Social Security Administration so that SSA can do their job and provide world-class service, which is what everyone within the Social Security Administration wants to do, helping all of us who've paid into this system through our working lives so it's there for us when we need it, when we retire, if we face a life-changing event and become disabled and can no longer work, for the surviving minor children during the loss of a breadwinner. Social Security is part of the fabric of this country, and to see it under such sustained attack through underfunding is really, it's something that we can't allow to continue. So I want to welcome everyone, thank everyone for joining us, and we're going to open with some brief remarks from the senator from Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me begin by thanking AFGE, Social Security Works, and everyone who is tuning in. Social Security, as you all know, is one of the most popular and successful government programs in the history of our country. For more than 80 years, Social Security has paid out every nickel owed to every eligible American. Today, while many people take Social Security for granted, let us remember, before Social Security was created in 1935 by President Roosevelt, about half of our seniors were then living in poverty. Today, though still too high, the senior poverty rate hovers at around 10%. In 2021, 70 million Americans receive benefits through programs administered by the Social Security Administration. While the agency is handling a record number of people, they also have the lowest staffing level in 25 years, leaving a growing backlog and workers who feel overworked, overwhelmed, and exhausted. From 2010 to 2021, Congress has cut Social Security's operating budget by 13% when accounting for inflation. Meanwhile, the number of beneficiaries rose by 21%. These cuts are forcing fewer workers to do more work with fewer resources. Every single day, I hear from Vermonters experiencing serious delays with the Social Security Administration. Many have been waiting for up to 6 months to see a single benefit payment they were already approved for by Social Security. These calls come from some of the most vulnerable people in my state, people with disabilities or seniors who are struggling to pay for basic necessities like food and rent. Imagine what a 6-month delay means to people who have no other source of income and depend upon Social Security to remain in their homes and to feed themselves or their families. It is outrageous that thousands of Americans suffer and die each year on wait lists to get the modest Social Security benefits they need to survive. 110,000 people died waiting for Social Security disability insurance from 2008 to 2019, and about 48,000 people filed for bankruptcy while waiting from 2014 to 2019. Social Security is the most successful government program ever. But it cannot work if it doesn't have adequate staff to answer the phones, meet with applicants, and process claims. We must reject Republicans' efforts to cut and privatize Social Security and instead boost Social Security's administrative funding so that employees have the resources they need to ensure that all seniors and people with disabilities receive the benefits they have earned and deserved in a timely manner. Thank you all very much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. It's really a wonderful thing to have fighters like Senator Sanders fighting for Social Security, to expand benefits for everybody, to increase funding for the administration of the system. And it's really, it gives us hope. But I also want to remind people, and I think people know, that there is an entirely other DC, an entire other system of politicians who literally come to this town in order to do what their billionaire donors tell them to do. And what they tell them to do is to destroy Social Security. This is a system, as Senator Sanders said, for over 80 years. It hasn't missed a single payment. Through boom time and bust, through war and peace, through health and pandemic, Social Security is the rock that people can count on. Compared to the risky alternatives on Wall Street, which we see evaporate with like a Wall Street caused collapse in 2008. We saw 401ks turned into 201ks. But through it all, Social Security was the rock that people could count on. And that's why Republican politician attacks at the behest of these billionaire donors, they've had to become a little sneaky about it, because the American people love Social Security. It's one of the few things that everybody agrees on. It doesn't matter where you are. I've been all over this country. It does not matter where you are. You can be in a room full of camo NRA hats, or there's a parking lot full of electric vehicles. Everybody loves Social Security, except for those billionaires and the politicians who dance to their tune. So what they do is they try to attack it in different ways. They try to use coded language like chain CPI, or they talk about raising the retirement age. All of those are just benefit cuts. But at the same time that they've been trying to figure out how to reach into our pocket and steal our money by cutting our benefits, I think the attack that has borne the most fruit for the billionaires, the insidiousness of this attack is why it's actually just continued, and we have fought incredibly hard against it, but we are not winning on this one, is what we call the death by 1,000 cuts. This is where they go in to demoralize the workforce that administers the program. This is by cutting the budget to administer the system every single chance they get, attacking the workers with everything that they can do when it comes to a contract negotiation, making it really difficult to work at SSA and deliver the world-class service that we have all earned by paying into the system. The death by 1,000 cuts attacks on Social Security is what we're raising up right now and calling for the end to this crisis caused by underfunding. And we're going to hear from a panel of experts right now on what that looks like and in what ways we can fight back against this crisis of underfunding. I'm going to start with Rich Couture, who is the president of AFGE Council 215. Rich, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. My name is Rich Couture. I am president of AFGE Council 215, which represents SSA Hearing Office and Appeals Council employees nationwide. I've also served as the spokesperson for the AFGE General Committee, the umbrella body representing about 43,000 SSA employees nationwide. Now, today I'm going to provide you with a brief summary about how SSA's Office of Labor Management and Employee Relations, or OLMER, has impeded progress towards improving working conditions for our employees, slowing attrition, which in turn slows our ability to provide acceptable service, levels of service rather, to the public. Since January 2021, the Biden administration issued several executive orders and policies geared towards improving employee working conditions, modernizing public service, and fostering cooperative labor management relations to help further those goals. Examples include Executive Order 14003, which rescinded anti-union, anti-employee executive orders from the last administration and promotes cooperative relationships. Executive Order 14025, which aims to increase employee access to their unions and vice versa, and encourages the creation of labor management partnerships. The recommendations of the White House Work Group on Labor Relations, chaired by Secretary Marty Walsh, and the President's Management Agenda, which is also co-signed by SSA Acting Commissioner Kijikazi, which also promotes labor management partnership. Despite these initiatives, we have not seen partnership agency-wide at SSA, but rather we've seen the continuation of an anti-worker attitude perpetuated by the last administration through OLMER. Now, OLMER will tell you that we must have a partnership because we have negotiated several agreements over the last year, but that would only be half the story. In reality, every single major agreement we've reached with OLMER only happened after weeks, if not months, of fighting at the bargaining table, complaining to the administration and to Congress about OLMER's bad faith tactics, and filing grievances and unfair labor practice charges to seek relief. Every single time. That is not a functional relationship, much less a partnership. OLMER has refused our request for a full renegotiation of our Trump-era contract, only agreeing to negotiate limited issues, and refused to negotiate over a heavy-handed telework policy or over a broken performance system that falls harshly on minority, disabled, and lower-graded workers. Last December, AFGE proposed a partnership program similar to the successful program the parties used during the Clinton era, and OLMER has not yet responded to that request almost a year later. Meetings between SSA components and our councils during and after our return to the offices have failed to produce positive outcomes for employees in all but one component, despite the intent to have them operate like partnerships. We have requested negotiation over implementation of Executive Order 14025, over the President's Management Agenda, and other initiatives like the executive order making it easier for federal employees to vote, as well as the Acting Commissioner's Equity Agenda. Each and every time, we have either been ignored by OLMER or been given excuses as to why the agency cannot negotiate. SSA did not hesitate to implement anti-union, anti-employee orders and policies, but they're dragging their feet on initiatives that will improve relations, improve working conditions, and improve public service. I want to be clear. The acting commissioner inherited OLMER, and I'm not 100% sure that she is fully aware of what OLMER is doing. In any case, OLMER's approach is antithetical to the acting commissioner's agenda, the president's agenda, and Congress's finding in the federal labor management relations statute that collective bargaining is necessary for effective and efficient government. These ongoing problems only exacerbate the morale and attrition crisis at SSA. The union and the agency need to be working together cooperatively to improve working conditions, to stop losing experienced employees, and to solve pressing public service problems. Now, there is hope. A kind of partnership exists between my council and the Office of Hearings Operations. For over a year, we have worked together to identify goals and on how to achieve those goals. OHO has made the relationship with labor, as well as in improving its own management culture, as top priorities. And while this remains a work in progress, we have been able to get much more accomplished without litigation, without complaining to outside parties, frankly, because I believe OLMER's not involved. If we at OHO are able to put the relationship first and to get results for employees and for the public, there is no reason why that approach cannot be emulated across the board at SSA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rich, for that discussion. I'm going to go right to our next panelist, and we will have a Q&A at the end of our panel. So if you have questions, you can put them into the chat on Facebook or otherwise get them to me and I will ask them. But right now we're going to hear from Sherry Jackson, who's the second vice president and legislative action coordinator at AFGE Council 220. Sherry?
Good afternoon. As Alex noted, my name is Sherry Jackson, second vice president of labor relations and legislative coordinator for AFGE Council 220. Council 220 represents 26,500 field workers serving 63 million Social Security recipients at 1,200 field offices, teleservice centers, and workload support units nationwide. We are one of 6 councils that make up the General Committee of AFGE at SSA, which represents a total of 42,800 SSA bargaining unit employees. We welcome all of our council colleagues joining us today live or tuning in at home or after they get out of work. The agency's staffing crisis is both acute and profound, adversely affecting not just overworked Social Security employees, but fundamentally beneficiaries, applicants, and ultimately taxpayers far and wide. I'm here today to share our primary request of Congress, as well as a few of our top policy recommendations to the agency. First, some context. Right now, the agency operates with 4,000 fewer field office and teleservice center employees than it did 12 years ago. Overloaded, overworked, and underpaid, thousands more of those workers are expected to depart in the current fiscal year. The current workforce of less than 60,000 is at a 25-year low. At the same time, the number of beneficiaries has risen by 10 million, a 21% increase. AFGE is requesting $16.5 billion in emergency funding for fiscal year 23. That's an encouraging step. Ooh, excuse me. The House and Senate have preliminarily approved a $400 million increase, $100 million quarterly from FY22 funding levels in the form of a continuing resolution that expires December 16th. While that's an encouraging step, with inflation exceeding 8%, the net impact of that hike will be negligible. The costs of inflation will largely start hitting the agency in January. Public service will face a crisis if more funding is not provided in December. $16.5 billion in fiscal year 23 funding request represents a $1.726 billion increase above the president's $14.773 billion budget request, but it is the drastic increase that the agency needs in order to provide the American public the service that it deserves. 60% of these additional funds could be earmarked to increase staffing back to fiscal year 2010 levels, with another 18% dedicated to reducing state disability determination service backlogs. Turning now to our policy recommendations. Outdated technology, along with archaic agency policies that don't reflect the modern world in which we live, are crippling our ability to provide the core services that Social Security's aging and most vulnerable populations deserve. Technology-driven, consumer-friendly practices are now commonplace in the private sector and at other federal agencies. We are calling on the SSA to follow suit. For example, allowing Social Security Administration beneficiaries the choice to start, stop, or change voluntary tax withholding through their My SSA account. The agency utilizing existing interface queries to verify lawful presence of claimants and match existing policy regarding proof of age tolerance for citizens with lawful aliens could save the American public considerable processing time and hassle with the current requirements to submit original documents. Congress should increase funds for SSA to update its technology, but what the agency must also do is utilize the funds wisely and do more to meet President Biden's Executive Order 14058, which calls on each federal agency to take advantage of existing technology to, quote, transform the federal customer experience and service delivery. And as the As the time passes, these are things that must continue to happen and should continue to happen at SSA. However, make no mistake, the long lines and excruciating wait times that persist at field offices are a direct result of this prolonged staffing crisis. Such service delivery inefficiencies are at the core of a workforce morale crisis that has employee engagement and morale amongst the lowest across the entire federal government. A recent survey of AFGE Council 220 employees found that nearly half plan to leave the agency within the next year. Since the onset of the pandemic, a fundamental shift in the global workplace has occurred. No longer do employers insist that their workers spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at a centralized office location. A transformation born from a public health crisis has now been widely adapted as a tool to increase both workplace productivity and employee morale. Recent union survey respondents overwhelmingly agree that by 90% of these changes are more efficient, productive, and focused while teleworking. 85% of respondents say that they can complete 75 to 100% of their daily workload while working remotely, which is significantly higher compared to the estimate for those working in the office. As the agency struggles to recruit qualified candidates and stem the exodus of current employees, a more robust and permanent telework program is essential. We know that qualified applicants are routinely turning down job offers from SSA. Their top reason for turning these offers down: inadequate work-life flexibility. During the COVID-19 pandemic, SSA employees worked remotely for nearly 2 years with high productivity, yet the agency appears unwilling to provide this work-life flexibility for employees. Employees who worked at home during the pandemic experienced an increase in quality of life. For example, teleworking parents could attend after-school sports events with their children. They could have their school-age children come home after school, saving on childcare expenses. For employees who need to work from home, teleworking has been a life-changing option. A temporary telework policy that's now in a holding pattern does not provide workers with the long-term assurances needed for SSA to keep and grow their vulnerable workforce. To that end, the agency must reopen Article 41 of our contract that governs telework and implement a permanent telework program. SSA will not be able to recruit and retain a quality workforce without utilizing telework effectively. And I'll turn it back over to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Sherry.
You're welcome.
As Sherry noted, across this country, Social Security and the Postal Service, these are, for many people, the only interactions that they really have with the federal government, and they're critical. These are the magnitude of decisions, of life decisions that occur in claiming your Social Security benefits, trying to figure out the status of benefits or disability claim. These are not decisions that can be done under a situation where workers are struggling, where underfunding has caused a staffing crisis. And I want to talk to let our next panelist tell us about that interface and what is at stake in this tipping point where we find ourselves in this staffing crisis. So I want to turn it over to Rebecca Vallis, who is a senior fellow at the Century Foundation. Rebecca?
Yeah, Alex, I really appreciate that question, and I appreciate everyone coming together today. I'm going to pause quickly and just do a visual description because I come from the disability community, and that's part of what we do in events. I'm a white woman with brown curly hair and some big honking unicorn earrings and a black shirt, and I've got a whole eclectic bunch of art going on behind me on the wall. So Alex, I think I really appreciate how you asked that question, and I really appreciate kind of where you're taking this conversation, because it's really easy to get lost in some of the facts and figures. It's really easy to sort of start to have your eyes glaze over when you're hearing about, quite literally, government bureaucracy as the subject, right? And at the same time, there are just really dire human consequences right now playing out in huge numbers of people's lives and families' lives as a result of the dramatic and longstanding underfunding of the Social Security Administration's administrative budget. I think others have already heard the numbers, but it really does bear repeating. Since 2010, SSA's operating budget has fallen 14% or more after adjusting for inflation, and staffing has dropped 13% or more.
Mhm.
The number of Social Security beneficiaries has grown by 21%, and those are already numbers that are starting to be out of date. And so when you ask me what happens when you underfund an agency as critical as the Social Security Administration, I'll take you to a place that starts with saying the sentence, eligibility doesn't equal access. And that to me is something that's really important to ground conversations about administrative funding in, because delivering on the promises of Social Security's programs, which include Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income, which are enormously important for the disability community, delivering on the promises of those programs requires ensuring that eligible individuals and families are able to access SSA's vital programs in their time of need. It's not good enough to be eligible if folks can't actually access the benefits. And that requires ensuring that Social Security has the administrative resources that it needs to address not just challenges with customer service, like we've been hearing about from Rick and from Sherry and Alex, as you and Senator Sanders described, but there is a deeply, deeply unjust and unconscionable crisis that has been playing out quietly for years now, which is that there are serious, serious backlogs at the Social Security Administration that are not the fault of the employees. They're the fault of inadequate resources to address the backlogs of disability claims that pile up. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because the human consequences when it comes to backlogs in disability benefit applications are shameful, and they are stark, particularly for a disability community that already is still in the middle of a pandemic that isn't over and that has already created the largest mass disabling event in modern history in the form of folks with long COVID. That's the moment in human history that we find ourselves in as we have this conversation today. So what are those human consequences that I've referenced? Well, unlike with retirement claims, disability claims require a lot more action and time on the part of Social Security staff, because part of that process includes making disability determinations, not just seeing if someone is eligible, not just making sure someone's eligible based on their finances and their work history, if that's part of it, but also, are they disabled under the law? And that's something Social Security has to answer with every individual claim. So today, because of the dramatic underfunding of SSA's administrative budget, people with disabilities are facing unconscionable waiting times to get those decisions on their disability claims because of backlogs that do not have to exist. Delays in accessing Social Security disability benefits, which are often survival income for people who in many cases have no other source of income to turn to, those kinds of delays don't just cause inconvenience. They don't just cause disappointment. They cause struggling individuals and families to be unable to pay their bills, to skip meals, to go without needed medical care. And worst of all, thousands of people die every single year in this country waiting for disability benefits because of the backlogs that don't have to exist and which could be addressed with adequate administrative resources. And I'm going to offer a memory and an experience that came very early in my life as a legal aid lawyer years ago that really burned the human consequences I'm referring to into my brain. It's easy to get lost in the statistics, but early on in my time as a legal aid aid lawyer, one of my first clients that I ever represented trying to get SSI benefits, I'll call him Mr. B, he passed away before the date came for his hearing. He had been wrongfully denied disability benefits already twice before he even got to me and my legal aid organization because of all the challenges he had faced navigating a very complex application process before he got help from a lawyer. He was in his mid-30s when he passed away because he wasn't able to access the benefits that could have helped to stabilize his life. And now we have a long overdue a GAO investigation. We've had plenty of acronyms today, so that's the Government Accountability Office. And that GAO investigation, which came out just last year, has finally put numbers to the human toll of underfunding the Social Security Administration. And what that GAO investigation found was that between 2008 and 2019, 109,000 applicants for disability benefits died waiting on their appeals. Countless thousands more have died waiting for disability decisions since the report even came out. These are statistics that aren't just shameful. This should be keeping all of us up at night. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be that way. And Congress gets to choose whether this agency, this critical agency, has the resources that it needs to deliver on the promises of these programs. So SSA needs adequate funding to address backlogs at every level of the disability determination process. And this is a moment again, where not only are we in a pandemic, but as I said before, and it bears repeating, we're living through a mass disabling event, the likes of which we don't even know yet how many people are going to be impacted and newly disabled. This is a moment where we can't just continue to hear from Congress, SSA needs to do more with less. This is a moment where we all need to come together and put party aside and say, we all care about making sure that we and our friends and our loved ones and our fellow community members, and in particular, people with disabilities and older adults, are able to access these incredibly important bedrock programs that provide survival income for so many people when we need them most. So Alex, that's where my brain goes when I start to think about what the consequences are of underfunding this agency. It's not just about dollars and cents. There are lives on the line.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. And I want to note that we are speaking both to the public on social media and also to AFGE and AFGE Council 220 and 215 members, and we've been in discussion with them. We have some questions from them. Some are very zoomed in, some are big picture. I want to open up this Q&A session by just noting that if you have a question, please do drop it in on Facebook, on any of the pages that you're watching it on. And also maybe just the moderator's privilege of, I want to say we've been tricked into this one thing, because even on this call amongst us, we keep saying it like Congress is giving the money to SSA, like it's their money, and they're giving it to SSA to fund the administration, which is not what is happening. That's not how this all works. The money to fund SSA is literally coming from us. It's our money. The world-class service in the provision of benefits, the discussion, the whatever the people need to ensure that they get the benefits that they've earned, that's part of the benefit of Social Security. That's part of what we pay into out of every one of our paychecks. I see the money come out. It's my money. Congress isn't giving us anything. The only thing Congress is doing is getting in the way of the Social Security Administration using our money to administer our benefits. So I always want to remind the Congress, it's not your money, it's our money, and you got to get out of the way. Starting in December, we can return to that a bit. But Sherry, I have a pretty technical question for you. If that's good, can you explain how the policy regarding proof for lawful aliens would work?
Sure. Basically, right now, what happens if a person has to come in and conduct business regarding their citizenship or for changing from a different status of immigration. They have to come into the office and bring in or potentially leave their documents that show their status. Now, it's technically not legal for them to leave their documents. They have to have it on them at all times in the event that they need to be questioned or provide something for work. Right. And if they're trying to come in and, they have their families as well, they have family obligations or work obligations, they can only come during core working hours for the office, which is between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Now, if our policy was updated to something that is modern, the only thing that they would need to do, they could go in, just like if you're filling out for a mortgage or what have you, they would only need to take a picture of and scan in, for example, their document instead of coming into the office. Then from there, we would be able to use the interface with the different other governmental entities, and we would be able to verify their information without them having to make a trip to lose work to come to the office, or if they're ill, having to come into the office, and they would not have to part with their original documents. We would be able to do an interface in a modern, clean way, and their business would still be handled. Right now, we're still working like it's 1965, and there is no reason to do so. You can do everything online insofar as verifying your residency and what have you. The state does it. Private industries do it, banks do it. We're lagging at Social Security, and we are only lagging because of a refusal to update our policy.
Thank you for that, Sherry. And yes, it sounds like another very, very common sense policy that should just be obvious to be implemented, but we come up time and time again with sort of these ghosts of previous fights or current fights that we're in to provide benefits and the services that are needed. Rich, you mentioned this previously, and I think this next question really gets to it, which is a lot of the stuff that you're about by worker and busting unions across the government as fast and as furiously as they could with no hesitation, right? They would put out an executive order and it would just boom, do it. And it seems like we're somehow still stuck in fighting against those. This is the question. You spoke a lot about the negotiation between the unions and SSA. How do those negotiations impact SSA's ability to fulfill its mission and serve the public?
Thank you for the question. I want to kind of bring this to telework for a moment because there's been a lot of discussion about that. I don't know if Sherry's touched upon it. And I know that there's been some concerns on Capitol Hill as to the impact that telework has had, potentially had on service delivery at SSA. And to say at the outset that nobody in this call, and none of the panelists from AFGE are advocating for closing offices where the public would have access to services where those services are necessary. We have, in fact, sought in negotiations throughout the course of this year and in meetings with between 220 and operations, between my council and hearings operations, finding ways of maximizing telework, finding ways to make non-portable work, meaning work that can't be performed at an alternate duty station at home, to make it portable so it can be done elsewhere. And by and large, those conversations, those negotiations haven't gone anywhere. The telework article that we have in our contract gives the agency full discretion in terms of whether to even have a telework program, frankly. And a lot of the experience that we've got right now, meeting employees, meeting union representatives, has been what happened in November of 2019 and what happened in January of 2020, when we saw draconian cuts made without any demonstrable business reason to telework in the field, in field offices, our teleservice centers, our workload support units, our hearing offices, headquarters, regional offices, payment centers. Agency-wide, we saw telework either entirely evaporate or be reduced to such low levels as to defy reason. And we have that experience, and it's why we continue to fight to make sure that we can secure a long-term permanent guarantee for telework. And it's necessary to stave off at least part of this attrition crisis. We've heard the figures that Sherry just shared moments ago, where you're looking at potentially half of field office workers leaving the agency because of inadequate telework. And so the reason why we are having backlogs in the field, why we're seeing service delays on the 800 number, has absolutely nothing to do with telework. Has everything to do with understaffing, with underfunding, with under-resourcing, with technology that just doesn't work, which again goes back to funding, goes back to oversight, has nothing to do with the employees. But the reality of the situation is that SSA is not an island separate from the national job market. The same pressures other employers are seeing with respect to benefits and with respect to pay, SSA is likewise susceptible to. And if it doesn't rise to meet the occasion, or if Congress doesn't rise to meet the occasion with adequate funding, then what will happen will be an exodus out the door that we have not seen in a very, very long time. Because employers are going to go to where the best deal is for themselves and for their families, be it pay, be it telework, be it what have you. And that's what they're going to do. We've tried addressing those problems proactively through negotiations. We've tried to do that through these, what we would like to see as partnership style meetings. And there simply hasn't been any urgency on the part of SSA's labor relations apparatus to seriously sit down at the table to put together a partnership program that will allow components like operations and councils like 220 and OHO and 215 and elsewhere to sit down, discuss the interests of both the employees, discuss the public service issues, and try to come up with ways where there's common ground upon which we can build a solution that works for everybody. We do not view this as a zero-sum game. We don't view negotiations as zero-sum. We're not here to necessarily win. We're here to get solutions that will work for our people, give them what they need in order to stay, avoid the brain drain, which will seriously impair SSA's service capacity, and improve public service. A lot of the stuff that Sherry's talked about in terms of policy, that has been attempted. These work groups have been attempted, but we haven't been able to lock anything down. And that's been the problem. That has been the key problem, is getting durable agreements that are enforceable, that will provide employees with the guarantees they need, and will provide the union and managers with the tools they need to solve problems going forward. All of that goes directly to public service, and it isn't separate. Collective bargaining is not separate from public service in this context. And if you want good public service at SSA, funding is a huge component, but so is a progressive collective bargaining approach.
Thanks so much, Rich. Couldn't agree more. And it's clear as day to anyone working in this like me from the outside that there's no bigger or better advocate for getting the resources that SSA needs for everybody, for management, for workers, for the whole thing, than you all, than the people on this call who are fighting to not only get what is on offer now, but also to increase funding. And so it really does seem like this partnership is an obvious one. kind of like those common sense policies. They're obvious ones. Unfortunately, in Washington, D.C., sometimes those are the hardest ones for people to see. They go out of their way to avoid those obvious ones and find ourselves in this, continual crisis mode where we're just moving from crisis to crisis to crisis, when in fact the solution is so clear. And I want to use a question to you, Rebecca, as a sort of a jumping off point on that, because instead of going from crisis to crisis to crisis and always having these calls with the dire human consequences, paint us the other picture. If we do get the funding that we want, right? If that is obviously what we need to deliver the services, what could the disability process look like? What could we do if we actually fully funded the workforce, if we actually had the backs of the workers who are providing these services, and the accessibility across the system for the people who need to access their benefits? Paint us the best picture. Remind us what we're fighting for, Rebecca.
This takes us right back to the "it doesn't have to be this way" place, right, Alex? Right? I mean, we don't have to go to science fiction. We can actually look not that far back into history, and we can see that SSA has a history under Republican and Democratic commissioners alike of actually being able to dramatically shrink backlogs when it gets the administrative resources that it needs. And that's what happens. This is one of those things that is as simple as it sounds. You give more resources to the agency so that more staff can process more disability claims. And guess what? The backlogs go down and people actually are able to access benefits in a more timely and just and humane way, as opposed to waiting and waiting and waiting and losing your home because you aren't able to afford the rent, or you go into foreclosure because you're too far back on your mortgage. I had clients years ago living in their cars, right? Because, and it's not an uncommon scenario, but again, it doesn't have to be that way. So the less dramatic, less crisis place is going to sound really kind of boring and simple. It's people apply for benefits that they need, and they're found eligible, and then they get them in a timely way. That's what we're all trying to get to. And it isn't really that complicated. It's also the system any of us would build for ourselves, for our loved ones, for frankly, anyone that we care about. It's not even, in my opinion, Congress's intention by depriving this agency to squeeze people out of being able to get the benefits that they desperately need. I think there's a disconnect, as there often is in Washington, between what's happening on the ground and what information the policymakers in Washington are seeing has to do with the choices that they're making. So one of the most important things I think that any of us can be doing in this moment is educating folks in Washington, and in particular, I'm talking about Congress, about how simple this really is. More money, more resources to this agency equals more staff and a smoother process for everyone, including all the constituents that members of Congress are allowing to frankly die on their watch when they don't give this agency the resources that it needs.
You're slightly nicer than me. I do think that for a large contingent of people of politicians in DC, they do know the human cost of underfunding. They actually actively attack Social Security the way they want to cut benefits, the way it's the same attack, and they know they want to starve the system or shrink it down until it's the size they can drown it in the bathtub, as has been famously said as the goal. But I'm willing to say, okay, well, if they are, maybe they just don't know. I don't believe that, but if they don't know, I think that's a good lead into this next question, which is open. But Sherry, I was thinking maybe you could take it, which is, how do we get people in DC, politicians, how do we get them to understand that they have to fund at the levels that AFGE Council 220 is pushing for, that we're advocating for, that across the board people are advocating for, people who know the system? And I will say there are many great people in DC. And there is a hang up because I've had this conversation where offices are like, there are these huge lines at my Social Security office and constituents are calling in, and Social Security is like often either number 1, 2, or 3, and very often 1 in terms of incoming communications into an office. And the offices are like, what? There's these lines and people are complaining and, what can we do about it? And I'm like, you need to increase funding. And they're like, besides that, isn't there a magicaler thing that I can do? Like, how can we get across that and really have people understand that it is as simple as we need to increase the funding to the Social Security Administration?
I think the best way that we can is probably working and educating them. As we have traveled to the different offices of Congresspeople, on both sides of the aisle, it is really astonishing that people don't really have a full understanding of what we do. Most people think that we just are, issuing Social Security cards or changing people's names, and that's really not the case. What we do, and I think what will help, is if we sit down and explain to them what we're doing as well as where the money is going, they would have a better understanding of why we're asking for what we're asking for. There are some people that are just dead set against it, and you're not going to be able to change their minds. But what I found is that the more that we are able to educate and explain to them the real functionality of what we do at Social Security, as well as showing them that when we are properly funded and when we have the tools that we need, there's a decrease in the traffic that is going into your office from your constituents because we're doing what we need to do, and we're providing service. If we don't have the tools, then you're going to continue to have us at number 1, 2, or 3 of people coming into your office to complain about lack of service or being able to get through or having their claims processed. So it has to be a symbiotic relationship where you have to really, Congress has to listen to us as we're the people doing the work, and we're able to tell them what's working and what's not so that things can be funded properly. I think we also have to make it a point to make sure that we are asking for these funds to be earmarked, because if we just throw more money at an agency that's not necessarily going to be using it in the ways that it needs to be done, it's not helpful to the public, and by virtue, helpful to the employees that are trying to service the public. So I think we need to make sure that we are locking and tying in why and where we need these funds to go.
That sounds like exactly what we need to do. Thank you so much to the panel, to each of our panelists, Rebecca, Rich, Sherry. I'm going to close out the panel with sort of an answer to a similar question there, but maybe from a little different angle, which is there are people, Republicans, who are openly talking about their plans to destroy Social Security. They're openly talking about their plans to hold the debt ceiling hostage in order to push through devastating cuts to benefits. Last time we saw this is where they also try to crush as much as possible the administration. So the choice is also on the ballot. Everyone else can be more polite about that than me, but this is an election that really has consequences for Social Security because the plans are out in the open, and the plans that the Republicans are bringing to the table, they want to put Social Security on the chopping block every single year. That's Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. Rick Scott in Florida wants to put Social Security on the chopping block every 5 years. Right? These are the ideas, and it's in the House. It's the same thing. Kevin McCarthy just said, I'm going to hold the world economy hostage in order to push through cuts to Social Security and Medicare. That's what's at stake. That's what's at stake this November. And I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that people understand that that is what is at stake. That it is a simple solution to make Social Security do exactly what it was set up to do, because the money is already ours. It's the system's, and we just need to get Congress out of the way, especially those ones who are actively trying to destroy the system. and let the workers do the work that they want to do. Let the agency do the work that it wants to do, delivering world-class service and the benefits that we've all earned. So in concluding this virtual town hall, it's really my honor to introduce our next guest, Jessica Lapointe, who is the president of Council 220, AFGE Council 220, to conclude the virtual town hall.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you to Social Security Works, Senator Sanders, Ms. Valles, and my AFG colleagues, Sherry Jackson and Rich Couture, for leading this important discussion today. Thank you all in the virtual audience who's devoted your time and attention to this crucial conversation, as well as your insightful questions to such an important matter. Once again, my name is Jessica Lapointe, president of AFGE Council 220. I would like to take a moment to recognize my coworkers in field offices, teleservice centers, workload support units, headquarters, payment centers, hearings, offices of hearings and appellate operations, and the data operations center and regional offices of quality performance who have dedicated their careers to the vital work of serving Social Security claimants and beneficiaries. As you've heard from our speakers, the Social Security Administration is in crisis. It is a crisis in service delivery, with woefully understaffed offices unable to keep up with the demands of growing caseloads and the influx of public benefit applicants. It is a crisis of confidence as public and media perception of a non-responsive agency snowballs. It's a crisis of plummeting employee morale as overworked, underpaid, and under-supported workers are leaving in droves, continuing to plot their exit strategies. We serve the most vulnerable populations of our society and should utilize every modern tool at our disposal to ensure that our customers receive their benefits and our services timely. How many more stories of applicants standing in long lines in extreme conditions due to a Social Security staffing crisis must we endure? How many more of our best and brightest employees will we lose to the private sector and other federal agencies because they are offered better pay, benefits, and more manageable workloads? How much longer will SSA workers be asked to do more with less? Congress passed a continuing resolution spending bill that gave SSA a modest boost, but SSA will need a drastic increase in December to avoid a future crisis and restore public service. As Sherry and Rich talked about, there are also many things the agency can do to improve morale and the ability to recruit and retain the quality workforce needed to serve the public, including partnership with the union to solve the problems we face together. AFGE Council 220 has now released its congressional and agency policy recommendations that would, if adopted, serve as a cure to the staffing and public service crisis we are in. It can be found at afgec220.org. We ask that the agency, the United States Congress, and the White House take a serious look at our recommendations and begin to work to find real solutions that will have a lasting and meaningful impact on the public that seeks and receives our benefits. Next week, we will be releasing our membership-wide survey booklet, and we will be personally delivering the recommendations and results to policymakers in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate that have the power and the will to make change. For the SSA employees and our AFGE members, I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at AFGE Union and at AFGE Council 220 and engage in 3 upcoming social media campaigns. Hashtag Telework Tuesdays, hashtag Red for Feds, and hashtag Support SSA Workers. This isn't about employee convenience, but instead about the fundamental need to make the agency more efficient, effective, and responsive to the public we serve. We are asking that every employee represented by AFGE wear red clothing on Wednesdays to show their solidarity and draw attention to the changes that we need to provide world-class customer service to the American people. Finally, I encourage everyone listening to join the AFGE SSA General Committee, either virtually or in person over your lunch break this coming Wednesday, October 26th at noon Eastern Standard Time for a rally outside the Woodland office at SSA headquarters in Baltimore, Maryland. The event will be live streamed on Facebook at AFGE Union, and additional details can be found at afgec220.org. Once again, many thanks to my fellow panelists, distinguished guests, and you audience members for your time, interest, attention, and most importantly, steadfast commitment to making a difference at the Social Security Administration. We deeply appreciate your support.